I want to go across now to former Finance Minister, heavyweight Congress leader P. Chidambaram joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Chidambaram, welcome. As you heard, some of those ideas to do with employment-linked incentives, doing away with angel tax, their version of the apprenticeship scheme. Did you get a feeling that, oh, these are some of my ideas that Nirmala Sitharaman is now seeming to act on?
Yeah, the government has borrowed ideas from our manifesto. I'm not complaining. I'm very, very happy. I wish they had borrowed more ideas and more suggestions from the Congress manifesto.
Let's deal with the first idea, employment-linked incentives. As former finance minister and expert on the economy, what impact do you think these employment-linked financial incentives could have on new job creation? Do you think just because the government is trying...
I'm not able to hear you.
Sir, I'm getting an echo, so could I request that you turn...
I'm not able to hear you, please.
Yeah, you seem to have a television set
please
on
understand,
around you.
I'm not able to hear you. Oh, this guy. What is...
Okay. We'll try and set that right in a moment. He has a television set around him, so if somebody can just tell him to turn that off, then the audio will go through better if he can hear me straight in the ear. Let me till then get in a word from Subhash Garg and from Rajiv Kumar. I'll go across to Subhash Garg first. The government is pushing the idea of employment-linked incentives very aggressively, Mr. Garg. In the end, how many new jobs do you think could potentially get created as a result of these incentives?
So it depends. There are three schemes. Scheme number one is job related, which says that if the job is given for 2 years, then the government would give incentive up to 15,000 rupees. So this is clearly linked to the job. Scheme 2 and 3, which are basically paying for the PF contributions, is also linked to the job. So I think both these three schemes should be linked to the job. But the other ones, which are for the internship, etc., is not necessarily related to jobs. Those interns may come for a year and then go back. The companies may not have. So I think we'll have to watch as things unfold. But clearly, the scheme 1, 2, and 3 may result into jobs. But there, one thing we also should remember, is this incentive good enough for the companies that you get a 1 month's pay up to 15,000 rupees from government to create a permanent job and give it to them, or you have the contractual relationship as you were doing earlier. So the pros and cons and the gains and the losses, I think would have to be evaluated. We'll have to watch in practice how things work out.
No, Saurav, this is an important question. You give that 1 month salary up to 15,000 rupees. Does it have the impact of creating a permanent job because you're giving it for 1 month? Is that enough for somebody to take somebody from the informal sector and put him into the formal sector?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, Rahul, I think this is the first step and it's an important step. It needed to be done. Better, I would think better do this and see what the results are. And, it's not something which is cast in stone. You can always tweak it later. But I think this step needed to be done to bring more and more people into the formal sector from the informal sector. And jobs has been a really continuing crisis. And I think this needs to be, recognized, and this does that.
Also, Mr. Garg, as far as the opposition's charge of, there being so much focus on Bihar and Andhra Pradesh is concerned, is that something that you think of as being legitimate, or do you think, the talk is more and the actual allocation isn't quite that much for it to warrant this kind of a political noise?
I think, Rahul, this is a very important point you're raising. After our afternoon discussion, I tried to look at the budget. What exactly is the central government promising? How much of the central government resources are going to these two states? Let's take Andhra. I think there are two promises. One, that the central government runs a scheme for capital expenditure loans for the states. Perhaps some more of the loans will be allocated to Andhra Pradesh from that. And the second one is that the multilateral loans will be facilitated.
Okay, so you're saying
I
there's more noise than actual allocation and therefore it's not so distorting. I want to go now to former Union Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, who joins us. And I was asking you, Mr. Chidambaram, about the impact that you think these employment-linked incentives and the other packages that have been offered for job creation will have on the potential for new jobs being created over and beyond what companies were already planning to do based on their revenue projections, based on their demand. How many new jobs do you think are likely to get created?
I don't believe the numbers 210 lakh, 30 lakh, 50 lakh, adding up to 290 lakh. I think this is another jumla. Like they said, we will create 2 crore jobs a year. I don't believe this. I want to see the scheme. I want to see how many industrial units, how many enterprises, how many businesses are brought under the scheme. I want to see the actual recruitment, and only then I'll believe these numbers. These are highly exaggerated numbers. Suddenly, how do they hit upon 290 lakh jobs?
No, but you'll accept that by putting jobs front and center, the government has acknowledged that this is our #1 challenge, which is what the youth of this country wanted to hear, which is what viewers of India Today television wanted to see, that the government say, yes, jobs is our #1 challenge, and the Modi government is putting all it has to try and address this on a war footing. And some things will work, some won't, some may work well, some may not work so well, but this is our #1 challenge.
#1 challenge. No, please keep your question short.
Yes.
Of course, this is a #1 challenge, but what did the RBI say? RBI said 8 crore jobs were created in the last 4 years, and I quote, there is no jobs crisis in India, unquote. These are the exact words of the RBI 2 weeks ago. There is no jobs crisis in India. Why did not the government come up and say, we reject the RBI's assessment, there is a jobs crisis in India, and we are going to deal with this jobs crisis? You can't have the RBI say there is no jobs crisis in India and then suddenly wake up and say unemployment is the first challenge and the principal challenge. We have been saying that for the last several years. Unemployment is the #1 challenge. Inflation is a #2 challenge. I'm glad the government has finally, belatedly acknowledged it after they learnt a lesson in the elections.
Will you commend the government for its fiscal discipline, the fact that the fiscal deficit estimate for this fiscal year has been brought down from 5.1 to 4.9%, suggesting that despite what happened in the general elections, despite that there are assembly elections around the corner, the government's committed to a path of fiscal prudence?
Every government says it's committed to the path of fiscal prudence. But what is the target? The target is 3% of the GDP. In the last 10 years, correct me if I'm wrong, the Modi government has not achieved the target of 3% in any of the 10 years. Last year, it was 5.6%. That is the year ending March 24. For the current year, they have projected 4.9%. I congratulate them for that. But when will they reach 3%? You tell us that. You can't play snakes and ladders, go up, come down, go up, come down, and the trend line of the fiscal deficit has been over 5%. We should reach 3% and keep it below 3% in the future. When will the Modi government achieve that target?
So that's one question, and it's easy to ask while in the opposition, but let's compare the impulse, the fiscal impulse, with what we are seeing in states run by the Congress like Karnataka, where they're actually adding to the fiscal deficit or in pressure, then having to increase cesses and taxes on various things that are under the state government's control because they have to meet the guarantees. At least here the impulse is one of consolidation and prudence, which we're already seeing have benefits because India is entering more bond markets and you got bond money coming into India, which wasn't the case earlier.
No, please understand, the economic survey has done a study of 23 states And after studying at 23 states, they have come to the conclusion that all the 23 states put together, the fiscal deficit is 2.8%. 2.8% for 23 states. I don't know whether all 23 states are only the BJP states, and whether any Congress state does not fall in the 23. So don't tar all states with the same brush. Obviously, there are states which there are slippages from the fiscal deficit target. I don't know the target or the achievement of each state. All I can say is 23 states put together, the fiscal deficit is 2.8%, which is much better. I emphasize much better than the 5.6% they achieved last year and the 4.9% they are projected for the current year.
My colleague and Business Today's editor, Saurav Majumdar, has a question for you, Mr. Chidambaram.
Mr. Chidambaram, coming to the capital expenditure part, which has been left constant since the, the announcement of the 11.1 lakh crore figure in the interim budget, do you think, we have reached a kind of a peak that beyond this, the government cannot keep front-ending capital expenditure, and it is now up to the private sector to come and, sort of take up the baton and take it forward? What is your sense? Because there was some disappointment in some sections today about the fact that the capital expenditure figure has not really moved up.
You looked at the figures closely. I have done that. On capital expenditure, the budget was 10 lakh 961 crore. They achieved only 9 lakh 50,246 crore. There's a shortfall of 50,750 crore rupees. Grants and aid of capital expenditure, the famous grant which they were giving to the state governments, the budget estimate was 3,69,988 crore. The achievement is 3,21,190 crore. There's a shortfall of about 48,000 crore. Together, there is a total shortfall on capital expenditure of 99,513 crore. Really, nearly 1 lakh crore on capital expenditure. And on revenue expenditure, the chief economic advisor in his economic survey says total expenditure for 23-24 is lower by 60,600 crore. I have still not located that number. They will be in the expenditure budget. I'll have to locate that number. Therefore, between capital expenditure and revenue expenditure, they could not spend the money allocated of nearly 1,60,000 crore. This is not either good marksmanship or good expenditure administration. There is obviously a huge deficit in your capacity to spend the money voted by Parliament. I think you have reached a level where you do not have the capacity to spend more either on capital expenditure or revenue expenditure.
Let's spend a moment on the economic survey you just mentioned. Anant Nageshwaran talking about the imperative for foreign direct investment from China, that India's trade imbalance with China is widening. So rather than just trading, allow for direct investment from China, which will create jobs in India, more manufacturing. How do you look at this while squared against the past 4 years where the likes of Dr. Jaishankar, Rajnath Singh have been taking very strong positions, wanting to disallow investments from China, saying till status quo is restored on the border, we don't want Chinese investment. And now the chief economic advisor taking a very different position from what we've heard in terms of political rhetoric for the last 4 years. Mr. Chidambaram.
In principle, the chief economic advisor is more autonomous than any other advisor. And that is how it should be. I have always felt that we must boldly embrace foreign direct investment as well as foreign trade. That's my position, that we should boldly embrace FDI and foreign trade. But of course, there are other compulsions. Obviously, the chief economic advisor does not see eye to eye with the foreign secretary or the foreign minister and the national security advisor. The task of reconciling these different viewpoints is that of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has not spoken about these things. Clearly, more investment, more foreign direct investment, even if it is from China, will create jobs. But then you'll have to look at the other dimensions, the foreign policy dimension, the defense dimension, the security dimension. It is the Prime Minister who should reconcile these different strands of thought. But the Prime Minister has not spoken on this. I hope he will intervene, which I doubt it. I hope he will intervene in the budget discussion, at least in one of the houses, say the Lok Sabha, and give his input on how he sees the path forward.
No, but on the other side, it's good that there are different opinions. I mean, the CA is speaking out, giving his economic rationale for why he thinks foreign direct investment is good, and the foreign minister and the defense minister have their own national security views of this. I want to understand from a political prism, Mr. Chidambaram, I'm told India bloc MPs will be protesting at Parliament tomorrow against this budget. So could you explain your political opposition to the union budget and how you intend to press on that?
I don't know what the India bloc leaders will say. I've spoken at a press conference on behalf of the Congress party, and I'm giving you my views. I don't know what the India bloc leaders will say. I'm not part of that group. They will have to weigh the pros and cons of opening up more and the threat from China. Please remember, the threat from China is a live threat. It's a clear and present danger. There's only Mr. Modi who gave a clean chit to China when he said that no foreign troops are on Indian soil and no intrusion on Indian soil. He will never live that ignominy down. China waves that clean chit all over the world when somebody raises questions about China's intrusion into India. Be that as it may, the India bloc will have to weigh the pros and cons. If my view is asked, I will say we have to take calculated risks. China is the second largest economy in the world. It's the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, and its economy is recovering. Its economy is recovering very fast. The volume of goods and services, the gross output China adds every year is several times more than India adds in the same year. Although we may claim to be growing at 7 or 8%, and China is growing at only about 5%. The gross domestic output that China adds is several times more than what India adds in the same year. So we'll have to deal with China while keeping in mind the security threat and the defense compulsions. We should use trade and economic relationships as a lever to deal with foreign policy and defense threats.
But that's what we were trying in the past. It didn't work.
All countries in the world would have to balance both economics and politics.
Okay, I want to ask you about consumption. And there was, a demand made by several opposition parties in particular that we must create more disposable income, particularly in rural areas. The government has gone for the longer term approach. Try and fix the nuts and bolts, try and ensure that you make the MSME stronger so that in a longer term period there's more job creation and investment. Do you think the consumption issue, particularly in rural areas, has been dealt with adequately, or would you have liked to see more?
Not at all. there's a saying that in the long run, all of us are dead. The point is, what about the short run? What about the life of the person who is living today? Today, the biggest challenge in rural India is the stagnation of wages. I've said that in my statement. I've given the figures. Wages have been stagnating for the last 6 years, both for self-employed category, for the regular wage category, and the casual daily labor category. For all three categories, wages have stagnated, adjusted for inflation, for 6 years. Therefore, we are demanding that the minimum wage should be fixed at 400 rupees for every kind of employment. The moment you fix the minimum wage at 400, and both the law and market forces converge and compel employers to pay 400 rupees per day, or near about 400 rupees per day, there will be more disposable income in the hands of the poor and the poorest people. Today, we are dazzled by the affluent class. The affluent class represents at best 1 or 2 crore, at most 10 crore of the people. They fill your cinema halls, they fill your malls, they fill your shopping centers, and you think everything is hunky-dory. But that's maximum. At the stretch, 10 crore. There are 132 crore other people who are not part of the affluent class, and they do not have enough disposable income to spend on wage goods and other necessities of life. Bulk of their income is going into food and education and clothing and the basic necessities of life. They don't have any disposable income at all to indulge in a few, I would not say luxuries, a few things other than the bare necessities. It's sad.
Let's spend a moment before I let you go on investment. We've seen a report from Access Research which talks about how the investment cycle, according to them, has begun to kickstart in real earnest. That's something the government is banking on. The opposition leaders we've been having on our broadcast keep citing that private investment isn't quite as rosy as the government would want us to believe. How do you look at this budget dealing with the issue of creating fresh investment opportunities for India Inc. and the appetite in corporates to invest in the India story?
See, I have not been able to locate the GFCF figure in the budget documents. I will by tonight. But I suspect that the GFCF has been constant over the last several years. The economic survey glosses over it. It says appetite is returning to private investment. I don't see that either on the ground or what I hear and read about. In fact, there is no appetite in the private sector to invest. Did any industrialist, big business house come on your channel and say, I'm going to invest 2,000 crore, 5,000 crore, 6,000 crore? There are some banner announcements from time to time. But really, private investment is sluggish, especially in manufacture. India's capital investment is largely government investment. There is very little private investment, and unless private investment picks up sharply, you will not have your GFCF rising, nor will you have the growth that you would desire. I would wait to see what actual investments take place over the next 6 months to a year.
You know, can I show that to you and to our viewers, the data that we do have in the public domain so far on gross fixed capital formation, which is really how much money is being invested back into building new assets. So I'll pull that out for our viewers if you just give me a moment. So if you look at the gross fixed capital formation, the 25 financial year estimate is 33.2. It's been a flat line since about fiscal year 22 when it was 33.4. So it came to 33.3 in fiscal year 23, 33.5 in fiscal year 24, a little less than that at 33.2. So it's been a flat line, Mr. Chidambaram, for the past 3 years, and that's also the estimate for this year. But if you also look at capacity utilization and look at that, while as an average capacity utilization stays in the mid-70s, in certain sectors, steel, cement, we're seeing more and more capacity being created. So there are different ways of looking at it. Sector-wise capacity utilization has reached the 80s, new capacity is being created, and in some sectors it isn't, and that's really a mixed bag, and that's the true picture at this moment, Mr. Chidambaram.
No two ways of looking at it. If GFCF has been flat for 4 years, 5 years, or 6 years, it means that private investment is not picked up, because government capital investment is rising every year, at least in nominal terms, and even if you adjust for inflation, it is perhaps rising. So GFCF is flat is a bad sign, number one. Number two, capacity utilization reaches 70% world over. That is a trigger for more investment. Why is new investment not triggered when India has reached 70% capacity utilization in manufacturing? For a variety of reasons. This is not only economic reasons. There are political reasons, there are legal reasons, there are administrative reasons. There is a fear, the industrialists I talk to, there is a fear about investment. At the same time, Indian industry is investing abroad. It's not as though they have no money. The finance minister boasted that banks are flush with funds, they've made record profits, private capital has made record profits. Where is all that money going? It's either sitting as idle cash or is it being invested abroad? So I would like to ask the government for a clear answer. If GFCF has been flat for the last 5-6 years and at about 33% of GDP, why is private sector not investing? I mean, I remember the finance minister appealed to them, pleaded with them. In fact, in one meeting, she scolded them. Why are you not investing? Showing her annoyance and irritation. She's entitled to be annoyed, but you should ask yourself, why is private capital, private investor not investing in India?
Okay, last question from Saurav Majumdar, and then we let you go. Go ahead, Saurav.
Mr. Chidambaram, I wanted to know your views on this issue of F&O. You know, over the last few days and weeks, there's been a lot of talk from the government, particularly from the Securities and Exchange Board of India chairperson and including the RBI, on the fact that F&O is becoming a problem, the increasing trading volumes on the F&O. Futures and options markets and speculation. You know, in fact, the SEBI chairperson has also said it is now no longer an investor problem, it is becoming a systemic issue, and the budget has addressed this in terms of at least increasing the tax on F&O, and that has dampened sentiment, at least in the initial part. What are your thoughts on F&O, and what do you think the budget, do you think that the budget has moved in the right direction on this?
No, I'm not an expert on the stock market or on futures and options. All I know is, broadly, generally, futures and options are riskier than trades which are settled immediately. Futures and options is a riskier option. Now, obviously, people are being lured with the promise of high profits, high returns. I think, to use the words of Greenspan, there is an over-exuberance in Indian stock markets. And part of it is because of the Prime Minister and the Home Minister who urge people to buy stock. I mean, I've never heard of a Prime Minister and a home minister urging people buy, invest in the stock market. I've never heard of that. There is an over-exuberance. I think the finance minister has poured some cold water on that over-exuberance. She has tweaked the capital gains tax, and she's taken away the cost indexation for some asset classes. She's trying to cool down. I think she may have been goaded to cool it down by the RBI governor and the SEBI chairman. But these are matters which cannot be answered in a question and answer. We'll have to sit down, 4 or 5 people have to sit down and knock heads and then come to a conclusion. I don't have any instant answer. All I can say is there is some over-exuberance in the stock market, and it is better to cool it down, especially the futures and options.
Okay, Mr. Chidambaram, we thank you for your time. The CEO of NSE will be joining us in a moment. We'll try and understand the extent to which this over-exuberance has been tempered as a result of these new moves, but always interesting to hear what the former Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, has to say about the Union budget. Thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it.